Moving on to dwarves.
Dwarves. All right. So with dwarves, they're a creature type are humanoids. Their size is medium, 4 to 5 feet. Speed of 30 foot. Lifespan of 350 years.
So you can now play a human that's smaller than a dwarf.
That's true, you can. Dwarves have dark vision, which, no brainer. You see that coming. They have dwarven resilience, resistance to poison damage, and advantage on saving throws you make to avoid or end the poison condition on yourself.
All same forward stuff as before.
Yep, which is actually also a tie-in that they are going to have things like conditions as they did in all that sort of stuff. Dwarven toughness, your hit points increases by 1 and increases by 1 again whenever you gain a level.
But wait, that was just the hill dwarf feat.
But we don't have subtypes anymore, so
what?
No.
There's no subtypes of dwarves anymore. They've mixed mountain and hill into one, and they've just given them the hit point maximum thing, which makes sense. And I think this is the sort of thing that makes the lack of ability score tied to your race still okay. Because if I was going to tie an ability score increase to the race, I would say dwarves would get Constitution, which would bump your hit points probably. Yeah. Whereas they've just tied it indirectly to cut out that middleman of the Constitution bump.
Yeah, and if they do stuff like
you
that,
just get more hit points.
Fantastic. You know what I mean? Like it makes sense.
Like the halflings being slightly more nimble, like you have advantage on dex save, or you have a plus to whatever dexterity, blah blah blah, without actually increasing the Constitution, the dexterity score.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying before as well. Having feats is a good idea. Like rather than the ability score, like the orcs, when we get to them, instead of getting their plus to their strength, they've got the powerful build. Like you count as one size stronger, one size larger for when you're determining your strength. So I think I agree with that design. I think that's
I think it's
better.
Fun. Yeah. The ability score thing that we were talking about before, like it's not a hill that I would die on. Exactly. It's just like a thing that I'm like, if it was me designing this game, I'd probably make it this way, but I'm fine with how they've gone with it.
I think we're all kind of in this vein of like, we're not afraid of power. Right, like as player GMs. So I think there was no point in which we said like, oh, how dare they move from one to the other. I think it was
too powerful.
Yeah, it was. I think all of us were like, give us more, please. More power, more power, please. All right. Forge-wise, your divine creator gave you uncanny affinity for working with stone and metal. You gain 2 proficiency with 2 of the following tools of your choice: jeweler's tools, mason tools, smith tools, or tinker tools.
Which again goes against what they've been going with the other things of like, if you're not raised in any way dwarven culture, and you if you were raised by someone who tried to raise you as if you were a gnome, like if you went to the full extreme, you were raised by gnomes and they pretended like you were a gnome and never told you were a dwarf and stuff, and you were like, why am I different? Why am I hairy already? And but somehow you just have.
Why do I have a Scottish accent? You don't have a Scottish accent, but I have one. Why? It's wrong. Why?
But you know what? I'm gonna say this now.
But you would be raised as that, and yet have jeweler's tools or mason's tools, and you would know how to use them, like an inherent.
Yeah, innately, right?
I'm gonna say this right now. I want the fabulous beard racial trait. Right?
Fabulous beard.
Yes.
Good beard. That's a nice
fabulous beard. Reduce all ranged attacks you receive from projectile weapons by 1, because it hits you in the beard and it dampens the blow. That for me.
So nobody can shoot you from the back?
No, because your back is also hairy. and the women also have
fabulous beards.
Yeah,
I have been tying with that. I've been like, it'd be kind of cool to have something that's a race that's just not sexually dimorphic in that way. That's not just elves. Elves are always androgynous, but like maybe the dwarves are too.
Yeah, and dwarf, and even if you shave your beard, your body hair is tough enough to serve as and it just reduces the damage by 1, right?
Resistance to all piercing damage. Let's talk about how
fabulous dwarven hair is, as opposed to like hey, here's a tool. It's like, oh, all right, well, I guess I'm a carpenter. No, I don't care. Mason and smithing. Right. So
I think the way that they've gone with the dwarves is that they're really leaning into almost not quite elemental, but almost elemental, that they're saying that they've got like such an affinity for stone that they are not just small people who happen to be good with mining. They are like part of stone. They're not made out of it in the same way an earth genasi would be, but they are. They have an affinity to it that is inherent to their genetics, that isn't anything to do with how they were raised. Because not only have they given them this forge-wise, where you're good with mason's tools, smith's tools, tinker's tools, jeweler's tools,
Yeah, I think.
But the next feature they've given is super useful, and I think it really works for the flavor that they're going with.
I'm a little bit salty about this next one because I have a homebrew race that had this just before it came out, and I'm like, yeah, it's cool. And then they're like, we've released it
on social media.
I was homebrewing it live on Twitch, so they couldn't be watching.
That's how they get you.
Damn it.
The last thing I would say about the Forge Wise, and I think it's entirely this, is the fact that they call it tool proficiency, right? Like having an affinity to these things might be a bonus, right? Or like, you know, you are good at this, but to sort of wake up one morning as a 6-year-old who is proficient
in
using
it. I know how to use these tools.
You know,
no,
that's
you're right.
I would. That's a good point. And in my games, I have much more of a focus on training things. Like you can train in anything in my games given enough downtime. And I've got like a training document for how you train in things and how long it takes and stuff. In my games, I would just say dwarves have a natural affinity for these things, and so they get to double their training bonuses when they're training in. If you choose when you start to when you get to an adventure and you choose to learn Mason's tools, then you would learn them super quick. You'd learn them like 5 times faster than anybody else or whatever.
The only time I would say that using this would be a great idea, and go with me on this. Have you guys played Grim Fandango? It's an old LucasArts game.
A little bit, yeah.
Right? I've got it on my playlist.
There was a character in it called Glottis, who was a mechanic in it, and he had
the big guy who couldn't get through the door.
Yeah, and he had to work with cars, and if he didn't, he would die. That's simply it, because that was his purpose. That was kind of the divine creatures made him to be able to work with cars. I mean, if you are proficient at birth with these sorts of things, I would say that in a divine sense, you are connected with the purpose of.
You take, like, in the same way that the Lakatha and the Tritons like take damage if they don't submerge themselves in water once a day.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
if you are a dwarf, if you're playing a dwarf and you don't do something with your Mason's tools every day, you start to get exhaustion.
That's exactly. You know what I mean? Cool. Like add some stakes to these sorts of things.
Yeah,
it's not.
You're proficient in Mason's tools, but you must use them once between long rests, at least once for 10 minutes a day. Otherwise, you have to make con saves and stuff.
Exactly. I think I think leaning into things like that, like might really make that stand out.
I'm wondering if it's better to even omit stuff like this, like Forge Wise, and then have it as something that is like you can take as a character as a general switch out. So like general feat for character creation when it comes to your race, because like I could have like. Maybe I do have a character that a dwarf that doesn't like to make things, that has never been like Forge Wise, and I switched it out for something else. I don't know if that gets too generic because it gets steps away from that whole like racial thing. I think that you're right there.
That is an option. Before they released this, I did hear a few people saying, like, speculating about, is that the direction they're going to go with character creation? They get rid of races and everything altogether, and they merge everything into just a pool of, you've got a certain number of points. You can buy this trait. You can buy dark vision for this many points. You can buy this. You just create your own thing. The only time I've seen that is when
people put the meme of like Pathfinder 2nd Edition with that.
Because it is confusing, right? We're stepping away from this. There is no like
there's no languages or proficiencies tied to your race except for these ones and tool proficiencies.
Exactly. And they say it's a divine connection as well. So all dwarves have it. It's a gift from their creator.
Which you could just say about anything. You could say about elves and be like, elves are good with their longbows and stuff from 5th edition.
Because a fairy looked at them once.
Because the Corellum Nerethian makes them naturally proficient in longbows. And all of the other things that they're getting rid of because it's the culture rather than the genetics. You could just be like, well, if you're going to hand wave it about the dwarven culture, you could say the same about anything. But the last feature of dwarf traits is Stone Cunning.
As a bonus action, you gain Tremor Sense within 60 foot for 10 minutes. You must be on a stone surface or touching a surface, or touching such a surface to use this Tremor Sense. The stone can be natural or worked. You can use this bonus action a number of times equal to your proficiency, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. Look, I think it's cool. I don't know about you guys, but every time someone has Tremor Sense, I completely forget that they have it. Right? Like,
it doesn't come up all often.
No, it doesn't.
I've had people with it, and it's just like, oh, that's right. I have Tremor Sense. How can I not know who was on the other side of the door? It's like, I forgot, man.
I think that's what makes it interesting, though, right?
the only times that I'm using Tremor Sense is because I've created an encounter specifically to use Tremor Sense to just like have that as a unique thing. They're fighting something that tunnels, and so the things that are tunneling knows what you are.
Yeah, I think.
But like, if I was a player choosing it, I would be like, I'm sitting like,
all the time.
Yeah, I'd be like, who's in that next room? There's 3 of them. I can feel them walking around.
Yeah, that's how 3.5 had it. It was like Dark Vision. You just had it if you had it. But I like the fact that there's a charge to it because it means that you have to use it, and it kind of gives me Toph vibes, like from Avatar, where it's like, and then you like, and then you kind of get that sense of what's
which is why I love it, because it does make me think the same thing. Like you're attuning yourself into, and I kind of like that. It is like a limited thing per day, because unlike what I was arguing about with the Dragonborn breath weapon, it just feels like part of your thing. It feels like the dwarf is having to like focus in and use some of their energy to go like, oh, I really need to focus on this stone. And it takes something out of them magically to be like, oh, Jesus, I can't do that many times.
I'm so salty because like I have a tree race that does this, so their feet like sort of like web out and root, and so they can feel the vibrations through their root system as they walk around. And so I was like, it's pretty much this.
Do they rip their feet out of the ground every time they want to start walking again?
No, I think it's just like they just web on. I think they also have like benefits for like, you know, staying
like resisting
stationary, stalwart, but like
Rackham, our friend GM Workshop, he sent me his plant races the other day because I was talking on stream about wanting to homebrew some plant races, and he has a similar thing with like a tree race that can root itself down into the ground and gain Tremor Sense. And then it can uproot itself, but it takes a minute, and it can uproot itself as an action, but it takes slashing damage when it does. So it can literally tear its roots up if it needs to move in a hurry, which I love. I really love that. And the Tremor Sense thing makes a lot of sense for a tree race, and the dwarves feel in the same way, but for stonework, where they just like root themselves into this stone for a second.
No, absolutely.
In their mind, and can sense whoever's touching it.
Yeah, I think just the 10-minute thing, like of how long it is, I reckon most GMs will forget when they've activated it. But
the rest of the dungeon, you've got through this next thing, and then they'll be like, wait a minute, when did you? Oh yeah, it's long gone. That was like 2 hours ago.
Yeah, I reckon even if you increase the amount of times you could do it, but reduce the duration to a minute, you would actually find it is way more practical for a D&D game than currently the way it is with it going for 10 minutes for less time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That would be my statement on it.
Is there a spell that gives you Tremor Sense?
I don't think so. Actually.
I don't think so.
Not that I can think of.
Not in 5th edition, but in.
Shut up.
Okay.
Moving on to elves. Elven lineages. So elves do still have 3 subclasses or lineages.
Lineages.
You can be a drow, you can be a high elf, or you can be a wood elf. If you are a drow, at first level, you get the range of your dark vision increasing to 120 feet rather than 60 for the rest of them. And if you are a high elf, you get the Prestidigitation cantrip just as part of it. Makes sense. You get a cantrip. But then it also says, whenever you finish a long rest, you can replace that cantrip with a different cantrip. So why did they feel the need to mention Prestidigitation anyway? Like it's like for the very first game, the very first session that you play, it has to be Prestidigitation. But as soon as you finish a long rest, it can be any cantrip after that.
Well, no. All that means is like when a high elf child is born,
they have Prestidigitation. But the next day, when they're 1 day old, they can have any other cantrip. It's weird that they've suggested Prestidigitation rather than just saying, one spell from the blah blah you can swap out every day.
Yeah, because when they're born, they just do like a confetti thing, like that's just.
You've got to include that in your world building for elves now. So elven births.
I love that.
Elven births are accompanied by a Prestidigitation. It's like the baby crying. They take the baby out and they smack it on the butt, and instead of going wah, it goes. Glitter just appears.
Yeah. And then the baby's running away, just changing color.
You bring the baby out covered in viscera, and it just cleans itself with Prestidigitation.
Yeah.
It's practical.
It makes sense. As a high elf, they get the arcane cantrip, and then wood elves, they get an increase to their speed to 35 feet, and they get the druidcraft cantrip, which I love. I think it makes sense.
So what's really good about this format, by the way, is they've actually sort of like brought it in tow with the Ardling and the Tiefling as well, where they're in this like lineage block. So I think the others could also be sub races if you look at them that way too, right? Like there's still different types of Ardling and still different types of elves and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But they've really sort of boiled it down into this like little table here, which is nice.
Yeah.
But you know what I think they should do with just a slight adjacent is, instead of lineages only, they should totally be also clan holds, like for like the dwarves. Like instead of like hill dwarf, mountain dwarf, etc., it could be like clan hold. You know, like the 5 king clan, the bellowing unders clan, and the Durgar. You know, like these are just different. Like
Because you are right, they haven't put Duergar in here.
I was wondering why Duergar aren't on the list when Drow are.
Yeah,
that's always a.
Not sure what they're going to do with that.
Are Duergar, and this I think is almost an entirely different discussion, are Duergar a race along with the dwarves, or are they a different species?
I think of them as the same as the delineation between Drow and High Elves.
I do.
They're a different subrace. They're a different subspecies that has delineated off, but can still intermingle and breed.
Yeah.
Yep.
So for those 3 lineages, you also get a 3rd level spell and a 5th level spell. I like the elves having magical spells because elves are inherently magical. I love it. It comes with you, your ancestry. Fairy Fire and Darkness if you're Drow, Detect Magic and Misty Step if you're a High Elf, and Long Strider and Pass Without a Trace if you're a Wood Elf. All of those make sense to me except for Misty Step. I think if I was going to do it, High Elves would get an Arcane Cantrip, Detect Magic, and then like Dispel Magic or something all to do with like the inherent nature around the understanding of magic. High Elves are all about arcane and understanding the arcane, and so they get an Arcane Cantrip. They get the ability to inherently detect when magic is around them, and then also having the ability to then dispel that magic, I think would make more sense than the ability to shift into mist.
Yeah, but then you got to kind of weigh up like how powerful that might be. But keeping in mind, you can only access the spells, I believe, if you have the spell slot to sacrifice. So if you aren't playing a spellcaster of that elven race, you won't be able to use...
No, you still have this.
You do?
If you're not playing... Yeah, I'm pretty sure. If you gain the ability to cast a spell with this trait. Once you cast this spell, you can't cast it again until you finish the long rest. So if you're playing a barbarian, you still get Detect Magic and Misty Step, but it's only once per day for you.
But you can use spell slots to...
If you are playing a
more.
spellcaster, you can then cast it more often.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's... Yeah.
I know
we skimmed over this.
People love their Misty Steps with Eladrin and Shadowkai and stuff like that.
Yeah, it makes more sense for Fey creatures to me than High Elves. High Elves to me feel like they should be more about intuitive and intellectual magic and the use of magic, and spelling and making magic. For me.
Yeah,
Blood Elves.
Blood Elves from like
Warcraft.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, they're like addicted to magic.
Elven traits, we skimmed over this before, but humanoid, medium, 30 feet, and 750 years on average. They have dark vision. They have one of those 3 elven lineages we talked about. They also have advantage on the charmed condition and all of that, like they did before. Yep. They have proficiency in perception, like they did before. What do your elven eyes see? And they have trance rather than sleeping, as they did before. Now it's official. You can finish a long rest in just 4 hours. Trancing, and while you're trancing, you stay awake, stay aware of your surroundings. So have a single elf in your party, and nobody needs to worry about keeping watch.
They've taken away the trance ability, right? Like you don't get a new like proficiency or anything like that when you trance connecting to like the...
What are you talking about?
The cycle. So like, you know how like the current elves, when they take a trance, they're able to get a tool proficiency, and astral elves are able to get like an overall proficiency when they trance.
Where is this?
You're talking about the seasonal ones. What are they called?
No. Sorry. So current elves have this new trance where they're able to get tool proficiencies whenever they trance. So they connect to the one.
When you say cycle. Current elves, you mean?
Oh, sorry, not in 1D&D, but in D&D 5e. When you trance, you were able.
That's not a thing.
It is a thing.
Nope.
It totally is.
Nope.
I'm bringing it up right now.
I'd put money on it. I would put money on it. Elves don't have a thing that allows them to take a tool proficiency when they trance.
Hold on. I'm looking it up.
I'm bringing it up.
Trance. Elves do not sleep. They instead meditate for hours. The common word for meditation is trance. While meditating, you dream of fashion. Such dreams actually mental exercise. For resting away, you gain the sand benefit of a human would from 8 hours of sleep.
It came in with the new books that just come out. Is it just Eladrin? Let me have a look.
I know Eladrin have it.
Is it a new rule, but not as new as 1D&D?
Yeah, it came in with the new 3-book set.
The Modern Canon.
Yeah, Modern Canon. Yeah, the new gift set. Yeah.
Okay. It came in that's with not what I was arguing. I was arguing that I've not even looked at Modern Canon because they just changed everything.
No, they did.
That was the first writing on the wall that they were bringing out a new edition, because they were like, hey, we're not going to say that this is a new edition, but we're going to get rid of everything that you're playing with and replace it with these new versions.
It might just be Eladrin.
And unlike they're doing with 1D&D, they didn't give any notice of like giving feedback on these things. They were just these are the new rules and new elves and new lizard folk and new things. And a lot of people were left going, I don't want those new things though.
I think it might be just Eladrin, because I didn't release normal elves. So yeah, you connect to the trance. Whenever you finish the trance, you change your season. You gain 2 proficiencies that you don't have. You can one with a weapon or a tool, or selected from the player's handbook. It might just be. I had to look at elves. It doesn't seem to be an elf, but it might just be that one. Okay. I mean, like elves don't get that, but Eladrin get that.
Excellent. We're gonna move.
And astral elves get that.
Move swiftly on.
Move on.
But yes, the gnomes. Dread, take us through the gnomes.
Gnome.
Gnome. All right, cool. So they're humanoid. They have they're small. You can be 3 to 4 feet tall. Speed 30 feet. Lifespan 425 on average.
So humans can be smaller than gnomes.
Yes, but gnomes can't be taller. So they have gnomish cunning, which you have advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws, and also gnomish lineage, which is again their sub-race choice. So you're a part of a gnomish lineage that grants you supernatural abilities. Choose from their lineage. From gnome lineages table below: forest gnome, the lineage of magic filled forest; rock gnomes, the lineage of primeval mountains. You gain the benefits of that lineage. Intelligence, wisdom, or charisma is your spellcasting ability for the spells that you cast with this trait. Choose the ability.
Pretty much what they had. So they've got that vision, they've got the intelligence, they've got the saving throws on advantage, and so the change they've made, subtle change, is that gnomish cunning is just advantage on all intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saves.
Yeah,
it used to be intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saves against magic.
And I think given that skipped over, but they also have dark vision.
They have dark vision as well.
Mentioned and ignored, everything does. I don't know how often it's going to come up that you're going to make an intelligence, wisdom, or charisma save that isn't magical based, isn't a product of an effect or a trap or something. But when it does, you now have advantage on that as well, instead of
just being magic sorcerers. Yeah.
The gnomish lineages is still just forest and rock. They haven't come up with any others.
Nothing new. No, yeah.
You know what?
I think the biggest change is that
they still haven't included the Swift Neblin in the same way we're talking with the Duragar.
I just went and checked.
They would include the Drow, but not the Duragar or Swift Neblin.
With Morning Canaan's presents Monsters of the Multiverse, they've actually they've put the Duragar in their own race, and they've put the Snurf Eblin in their own race. And I don't know if that's just because.
So they're saying they're not even gnomes anymore.
Well, the first line with the Duragar says these are dwarves of the Underdark, and I'm like, okay, but like why not just like put them in the dwarf section, right? Like at what point does that?
You know, like chicken in the sea, you know, like kind of coming up with different things. Can I just say this? If you D&D, look, I'm going to say this. This is to Chris Perkins, Jeremy Crawford, Ray Winger. I can't even say it. Winninger. If you guys are listening, right, and you are having trouble thinking of like different subtypes for gnomes, okay, I want tiny little red caps, white beards, right, little German gnomes, please. Yes.
Like garden gnomes.
The garden gnomes, yes. Please, little garden gnomes. There is nothing wrong with them. They're not silly. They're not stupid. They're amazing. Like the story of like what actual original elves were, like the cobbler elves, you know, like the Keebler elves and stuff. These ones. Perfect like for gnomes. Elves. Let's do it. Let's get it done.
The biggest changes with the lineages is like, because first time you get minor illusion cantrip, and you can also cast speak with animals, and you can do that a number of times, proficiency bonus.
Basically what they were doing already.
Yeah. The biggest change is rock gnome, which is like their tinkering ability has changed into being a totally different. You can cast prestidigitation to create a tiny clockwork device that costs like 10 gold pieces, and you can have so many of those per casting as well, and you can retain all costs from creating it. They all look like they function different
if you make a 10 gold piece clockwork dragon or whatever,
yeah,
after 8 hours it dismantles itself, but you get the parts back, so that you can
exactly,
you don't cost it every time you're doing it.
Interestingly,
which is good,
well,
because 10 gold pieces is a lot of money.
It's a lot of gold,
and it's the first indication that I'm getting that One D&D has put no thought into fixing the broken economy of 5e. Because they're saying things like 10 gold pieces to create a tiny little tinker device.
Here's a
10 gold piece for a tiny little tinker device. That's 10 full days of a skilled artisan.
Yeah,
their entire profits, not like eating and stuff. That's their entire profits for a 10 day.
Yeah.
So if you
create one music box, tiny clockwork thing that lasts for 8 hours.
So what you need to do is you need to make a tiny music box, sell it for 20 gold.
Yeah,
and then run away.
And then just
You've got 8 hours.
Fools! Interestingly enough, like it says that you can take the prestidigitation spell and make it have any effect in the clockwork item that you make, which is really cool. So you can make a little vacuum.
You can make a little cleaner.
It's just a Hoover. It just cleans.
One of those dog
dustbusters,
roller things.
Duster roller things. Yeah,
or a little hand warmer. You can have like a little clockwork device that warms your hands, or
a little hot plate to put your food on to heat your food.
Yeah, exactly.
Economy aside, I would say that is a roaring success. Again, same reason and logic as before, because it inspires creativity.
I will say though that it's a big block of text. Like I can see someone like looking at that, like I don't want to be that, and then just
I don't want to be
thinking
because I don't know what I got to do.
Yep.
I mean, it's kind of already that way. I like whenever I've played a gnome, I've always gone forest gnome, not only because of the flavor of playing with animals and stuff, which is kind of what you want when you're playing a gnome.
Yeah.
But also just from looking at the tinker thing and being like, I don't want to know what I have to do with all
that. No, thank you. And that's why you take things like like Forge Wise, which is just like easy. I know that I get that. I don't have to read. Like I don't want to read. That's a consideration when it comes to design and stuff like that. So I think the GM would probably read that and describe that to the player. I don't think a player
you can for the cost of 10 minutes and 10 gold pieces make a physical prestidigitation toy. Boom.
Yep.
That's it.
It does all of the things that a prestidigitation can do, and it lasts for 8 hours.
We don't need all this big crunch. I feel like that will stop players from playing that just because like it's too big.
Yeah, make it more accessible. That's our advice for that one. That's the feedback. Make this racial ability more accessible.
All right, moving on to hobbits. Come at me, Tolkien estate.
Please don't, because this will be on my channel.
Hobbits. So hobbits are humanoid. They are small, about 2 to 3 feet tall. So you can play a human that's smaller than a hobbit. You have 30-foot movement speed and 150 years on average. They have the brave still, same as before. They have advantage against being frightened. They have the nimbleness still, which is where you can move through a space larger than your own, a creature larger than your own. They still have the luck feat. When you roll a 1 on a d20, you can re-roll the dice and must use the new roll. And you have the naturally stealthy skill now, which I don't think they had before. Now they are proficient in stealth. That's because they, like the dwarves, have gotten rid of their subclasses, subraces, and there's no longer stout and lightfoot, which I'm fine with, because in my mind, only lightfoot halflings exist anyway, because stout are just like hybridized with dwarves. They're just like you've got poison condition and you're a little bit hardier, so you're basically a halfling dwarf. Dwarfling. Yeah. So halfling's super simple. I think the luck thing is the biggest draw for if anybody wants to play one. They're like, I really want to reroll ones.
Yeah. I think these, I mean, without obviously calling them hobbits, these I think are really closely tied in, like even more so than any of the other halflings I've played in other editions. Like you can always view halflings as completely separate to hobbits, but like with the stealth thing, with the luck thing, with the bravery thing, you know, like it just screams the Baggins. You know what I mean? Like
these are the Baggins.
Yeah,
they have changed that.
You've got this stuff.
Yeah.
Naturally stealthy. They have changed that.
Yeah, which I like. I like that because that's. I mean, hell.
Yeah, because it used to be that you can take the hide action when you're obscured by a party member or something.
Another creature member, yeah. So like if you're hiding, you can just make that check. I'm wondering, because they took away Mask of the Wild for Wood Elves, which is another
you can
so
hide in foliage.
Yeah, so they must be taking that away and they just say, everyone can take their hide action during combat. Why do we have to say that only these people can do it in these situations? They're just like, just make a stealth check during combat. That's fine, or in a situation.
Yeah.
So,
because there's already the rule of stealth that like you can't make a stealth check if you can't be hidden. So if you are obscured by something, you should be able to stealth. And they're leaving it more of a dungeon master's decision to be like,
it's like,
it makes sense that as a halfling you can hide behind that guy.
Yeah, instead of being like,
makes sense that because you're a wood elf, you can hide behind that foliage.
Exactly. Since I'm in a waterfall, the book says I can hide. Can I hide, GM? It's like, yeah, you can. Then you didn't need that. I just would have allowed that. That's fine. So
yeah. The only time you can't is if they're literally looking at you. But it won't stop any players from.
I can see you.
All right. A number of times I have to explain that a 42 on stealth because of Pass Without a Trace and a expertise in stealth does not make you invisible. Like if you get a 42 on stealth and then you walk out in front of the guard who's in a single line corridor and he's looking down the corridor, he's gonna see you.
I see you.
If you're not hiding behind something.
Yeah.
A 42, like it's even to like if you had a 42 in stealth and then you picked up a potted plant and walked it in front of you, I'd be fine with that because it's a 42 in stealth. 42, so you're still like hiding behind it. You're still like hiding and you're
moving closer to me.
What's happening there? But if you just walk out into the open and do no attempts to actually stay hidden, you're going to be hidden regardless of what you rolled.
Yeah. So like that, I think in those situations, you just want the player to be creative, right? Just like, I got a 42. Like throw a rock or throw your voice or do something rather
do
than
something
just,
to
like,
distract him.
Yeah. No, definitely, I agree with that.
All right, next up, we're looking at the orcs.
You mean half orcs, surely?
No, not half orcs. Full
orcs are playable now. Orcs are playable, and they're in the PHB. They're going to be one of the fundamental core races.
Oh, I love it.
They have removed all talk of them being barbaric savages. They've said that their gods are barbaric savages, and they were originally created by those barbaric savage gods, but they do not make any indication that you are barbaric or savage.
Yes, which I love because it is, obviously it's quite clear that me and Dread quite enjoy our World of Warcraft lore, but it's very similar in that tone to the Warcraft orcs, where they went from being these creatures that were built for that purpose of war and stuff like that, but have since broken free of it and have developed their own culture outside of it. Being more independent, being more separated from it. And there are, of course, people who still follow those like kind of rage gods and stuff like that, but it's not necessarily what defines the whole race as a whole anymore, which I like.
I think it's a step in the right direction because like you have stuff like the Drow with Lilith. Lolth, sorry, they're very close to Lilith, with Lolth and stuff like that, where like the gods, the culture, and like all that sort of stuff is the evil like essence of that those creatures.
Whereas to me, I'm on the other end of the argument. I don't like it, to be honest, because I think it's just kicking the can further down the road. There are certain monsters, like it's a war game. Essentially, they keep saying that there's 3 pillars of combat, 3 pillars of D&D, and there's but one of those pillars is doing the load bearing, and that's combat. Most of the features are designed around combat stuff.
No, I agree.
So you're always going to need bad guys to fight. You're always going to need to be able to excuse murdering things because that's literally what the game's about. And so saying orcs saying that they're not inherently bad and their culture's not bad and stuff, so that making them playable race, that's fine. When are we getting? What's the next one that we're going to do that to? Gnolls? We're okay with Gnolls being savage by inherent nature,
which are demons,
and then Gnolls eventually are going to become playable races because what about if I want to play a Gnoll that's not evil? And what about demons? What about devils? When are we? What are we okay with being magically because of magic, because of the gods? Because if we're already saying that the gods Grumsh and stuff are barbaric savages, then why is it not okay to say that they get smited to death as soon as they step away from being barbaric savages or something like? Why is it not like why would Grumsh not punish orcs that don't follow his barbaric savage way of living? True.
I think it's a very interesting comparison, gnolls to orcs, right?
We always need more monsters to slay, and I think orcs are fine to be that.
I think I'm inclined to agree to a degree. I think the majority needs to be that the idea of being a monster doesn't necessarily mean being uncivilized. Do you know what I mean? Like liches, for example, very intelligent, very cunning, very capable. Can a lich be good? Well, no, a lich can't be good, but you have the Baelnorn. And the Baelnorn are liches who have learned to kind of live with their undeath and do good in the world. So it's not as if the precedent of evil creatures reforming or doing things that are against their inherent nature isn't a trope that's already there. But I think with the not new edition, with the evolution, it's looking at the evolution of not only the characters as rules, but also the setting in general. This could be like in Paizo, they had the goblins were a monster race, and now they're a playable race in the core rulebook. It was very much in that similar vein of like, well, goblins were minor nuisances. Now there are people who are starting to accept them as part of their cultures because they just hang around in the cities and stuff. The orcs could very much be in that case where several wars or several big battles happened where, as even in their wartiming form, it was more imperative to team up with the presumed non-monstrous races, which again, please excuse my nomenclature here, I'm just using words at the time, might have inspired or driven those orcs into not necessarily following their monster lineage, and which is why we're now potentially seeing them as a playable race and as something that isn't necessarily
which I like if it is an in canon change, like it is in the story and the lore of the world that this change has occurred, they have become more civilized or more whatever the word is that you want to use, that there has been a tangible change in the history.
Yeah, that's what's happened. That's what I'm saying. I'm hoping as well. I hope it's not just a clean sweep and a wash to go like, I mean, look, I'm not gonna lie. I hate Drist. I do. I hate Drist because at the time, I was sitting there going, Drow are unashamedly evil, and I love that because it's a level of confidence, right? I am what I am. I don't need to please you. I don't need to be good because you think that's what I should be. And I loved villains who were like that. The Drow, it was just very much this was the society, this was the culture. And there were people who were who hated the culture, especially men, because Drows are a matriarchal society, and if you're a man kept under heel and you stuff up, you get flesh warped into driders and stuff like that. This is an evil group of individuals, and I really, really loved that as a natural thing. So when Drist came along and it's like, no, I will ignore everything about it and behold my glorious locks while I walk around with my panther.
Well, the Drist story is more of a divine connection as well, and like he was in the cycle of souls. From my understanding, he got put in the wrong place, or he was brought there, right? So
which
and through that storytelling lens, you can really observe the full like depth of darkness that is Menzo Brenzen, right?
You beat me to my punchline, Dread.
Right.
Yes, the reason why Drist works is because he was backed up by the lore and by the stories and stuff like that, which has trickled down into what the Drow have slowly started becoming as more of a non-inherently evil thing. I think what Rob and I are both are saying is, I hope that they're doing the same thing with the orcs, and it's not just flicking a switch to try and tick a box.
So I think what they're doing is they're just giving you the opportunity to have those stories, right? Like they're saying there are different variant orcs out there with different cultures and whatnot. So I was going to say before, in regards to the story of it, orcs in my world are currently going through that new age, new era sort of like push forward into setting up their home, which is Orc home. And because they are separating themselves from their past, bringing the tribes together and working as one D&D. But that's the story I'm telling with them, right? And like I definitely have tribes out there in my world where they're not that. They are raiding, they are pillaging, they are aggressive and violent and whatnot. But then I have this other kernel that is currently budding into a new civilization for orcs, right? And I was able to do that. And I think I have the tools even more so now when they give me a race, which is like, you can be an orc. And I go like, you can be an orc from Orkholm if you want, or you can be an orc from one of those other tribes and you can play that violent orc, right? I don't think that D&D, the designers can really decide that for me in the stories I want to tell. I think that I have to decide that for the stories I tell and the opportunities I give the players at my table. So,
but you could say the same about any monster. I want to play a gelatinous cube.
Yeah,
why do they not have stats for it? I want a gelatinous cube.
Gelatinous cube.
I want to play a demi-lich. I want to play there has to be delineation. We have to we have to make a choice of like which ones are the monsters that we slay and which ones are the not.
And is that like, oh yeah, so yeah, I do agree, and I think that's the story, right? So like having it, like, because like one of the characters at my table is currently playing an orc from Orkholm, and like he wants that story arc for his character, which is like, I don't want the world to see me as a monster. I don't want them to see my people as monsters. I want to be out there making a difference and making a change, and that's the story, right?
And I think and I'm not arguing that people shouldn't be allowed to play orcs. I'm saying that we shouldn't change the I'm saying that in my games anyway, I don't imagine I will be changing the lore about orcs from being, or not inherently, but much more likely to be evil. Because if you want to play, then you're making that choice. Just like I was talking about before, about if I want to play a halfling barbarian, I want to do so knowing that I am going against type. That is part of the choice of the character arc that I'm embarking on.
Yeah, exactly.
And likewise, if I want to play an orc who goes against the ideals of Grumsh and leaves his tribe and goes, I don't want to live like this, I don't think this is the right way, then that's a story choice I'm making for my character to be specifically against type.
Yeah, exactly. Because like
but the default for orc should be
monster,
evil, monstrous, barbaric.
No, I definitely agree with that. Because like my Orkholm was happened through storytelling as well. It was like a narrative thing that the players of the old campaign built into the game as well. So it wasn't something that I just did. So I agree. I do think that like the monstrous should be the default because you need monsters, right?
Well, in my setting, this actually works super well for my setting, because for my settings, monstrous races can become sapient regardless of what type they are, and there is actually an entire species difference between an orc and what I call a feral orc. Yeah, the ferals. Because it's not just a cultural change, it's an actual physical change. Like a feral orc in my world is hairier and more built like a gorilla, which
I think is fantastic world building on your part. You have made you've made a delineation in the world, but in the very like origins of your world as to what is and is not a monster and what can and cannot be slain. Like if you kill a minotaur, you better be sure that it was a feral minotaur. Otherwise, you've just killed a person.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's a fantastic idea that you came up with for your world building, is to make that delineation as to like, why is it okay that we're killing this thing and not this other thing?
Yeah, and it is a hard line. It is a hard line based on not just any stat or ability or anything like that, but basically the blood of, well, effectively an evil god, and its potency on that person. So there is actually a tangible thing. It's like this is an irredeemable, like feral orcs without powerful magics are irredeemable. You cannot take a feral orc and go and teach it how to be not evil. You can't do it. It just doesn't happen. You could talk to an evil orc who is not feral and convince them to be good, absolutely, because they're not the same thing. And I think that'd be how I'd view it. If you're going to take something, I guess, out of the monster category, it would be good to see something replacing it in the form of like maybe ogres step up to the plate where orcs were. So instead of say roving orc tribes,
but then what? 2 years later, we get people going, "Why do ogres have to be inherently evil? Why can't I play a good ogre?"
Well, I mean, ogres.
That's my argument
people
about
want to play orcs because orcs are romanticized as strength, power, and people who play powerful characters, I can very much.
So why, in the same way that they did with Adling, why didn't they come up with a new race, like something like Goliath, or like why did we not have some other new hardy race that is inherently whatever, they're strong and hardy and whatever.
That's an excellent question, and I think just because we obviously want to try and get through all of it, I'd say that is something to consider. Why call them orcs? Why not look at a new race that fits into a similar category and have that be a thing?
And I should also mention as well, I have not been the product of a hell of a lot of racism in my life, and so I do know that there are arguments here that I don't even know about or even understand. because I have never been able to fully understand the argument of orcs being having like ties to black culture and stuff. It's so foreign to me that is a concept that exists that I might be making my decisions and my opinions about how orcs should be in a world and things based on my worldview. And I'm more than happy to be educated by somebody who says, oh, this is the history of why they came about, and this is why orcs are considered racist and things.
I think
at the moment I just don't understand or know what that situation is.
What we do when we sit down and play TTRPGs is we have a conversation and we tell a story together, and themes and topics are always going to be like sort of present, because that's how we relate, that's how we learn, that's what we do. So like when stuff like racism and real life like things come into the conversation, that's when we need to start, you know, looking at it and considering it, right? So that's why, like, do we want to have those conversations? Do we want to explore those topics? Do we want to explore those themes? That comes into it, right? When they're introduced, and that's when the narrative changes, right? So, one example that I absolutely love, quick tangent, is there was a story, the story that I like from a show called Schitt's Creek, which talks about, you know, homosexuality. Like one of the main topics, like love interests, is homosexuality, and like you're watching it because in Schitt's Creek it's a rural town that they moved to, and there's this homosexual relationship there, but they never face adversity. They never have that topic or that theme come into it. There was no one in that story that brought homophobia or like any
the
adversity.
Drama that they chose in the story was never from.
You don't need to propagate that story. That's just normal. They're just like they're having a great, beautiful like relationship, and they never had a drink thrown at them. They had never been called out for it at all. It just wasn't represented. And I think that once we start introducing like racism into our stories, that's when we need to, you know, have a way of telling that story, like, you know, well, and like respectfully and whatnot. And so it's the same as that story with the homosexual relationship. They didn't want to tell the tale of diversity for a homosexual relationship,
which is an interesting point, because in my games I made the point of the decision early on that homosexuality is just as accepted as everything else. Yeah. It's not even accepted, because it's not like nobody would even think
about it. Yeah, it's the same in mine.
It's perfectly fine.
I've never had,
but in my games racism does exist.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, it's an interesting sort of self-reflection question for me is why was it that I said I'm not interested in telling the stories of homophobia and how homophobic characters interact with the world?
I think exactly.
But I am interested in the concept of racism. Exploring racism.
Yeah, exactly.
And the question of like why goblins are bad.
I'm going to say just before, because I mean, I feel like this is a whole other video that we could easily do on its own. But the last thing I'll say in regards to this is that I think the important thing to remember here for everyone is that everyone here in the chat here, we are very accepting individuals. We challenge people to challenge our ways of thinking and our viewpoints on stuff. So if you have opinions on this, don't be afraid to reach out. But if you do so respectfully. You know, we enjoy being able to improve and develop our worldviews, not only for, you know, the purposes of our TTRPG games as well, but also our just understandings as GMs. I think I definitely agree. I think it's a very, very rich topic to explore. And one of the things that I'm really, really happy to say that I do like is that they didn't ignore the past of what the orcs were, and they're looking at changing it. Because if they had turned around and just gave it a big brush and say, well, orcs are just good now, I would hate that. I would hate it absolutely, because it would mean that struggle was being pretended like it wasn't around, and I'm glad that they didn't do that. So yeah,
we're the stewards of our stories, so we need to be the ones that know what we're telling and what we're trying to represent and stuff like that. So I think them coming to like an equilibrium, it's like, hey, this is what you can do, whatever you want with this, gives less license for people to say, no, this book says this thing, so we have to tell this story. So I do agree that we need like a good line we like of reference, like with the whole like there are evil orcs, there is this situation. I think that's important. And at the end of the day we kind of have to decide where we want to go and how we do it. But you're right, cool. Very rich topic, and we could be here all night talking very much about good.
So. All right, so we're gonna speed through orcs
traits.
Not for a
humanoid
size,
medium. Yep. They're usually 6 to 7 feet tall. They move 30 feet and live about 80 years on average.
Nice.
They have adrenaline rush. So as a bonus action, a number of times equal to proficiency per day, you can dash and also gain temporary hit points. So that's cool. When I first read it, I was like, dash as a bonus just as part of your race. That's crazy. Nobody wants to be a rogue. And then I realized it's limited by number of times per day.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. That you feel in the moment, you're like, I need to move. I need to move now, and I need to put myself in this it's almost like rage light. You give yourself temporary hit points and you move double your speed. It's great, and it's I think it's very fun. It's thematic for an orc.
It's very fun.
They have dark vision. They have the powerful build, count as one size category larger when determining their whatever. And relentless endurance, which the half-orcs used to get, and now the orcs get them when reduced to 0 hit points, but you're not killed outright, you can drop to 1 hit point instead, once per day.
I do like that they removed the wording. Your adrenaline rush, the previous version was called aggressive.
Aggressive, it is and it specified, and it specified that you can dash as a bonus only if you're moving towards an enemy.
Yeah.
Which makes sense when you're talking about barbaric whatever's. They can charge in and attack things. Much quicker than they can retreat.
Yeah, so it very much so. They seem to be changing a lot more about what we idealize as like kind of strength per se for a race, as away from the stats and more to what they can do in that situation. So even though they don't have, say, physical strength equal to, say, a gnome, because the races are all the same, the orc has a lot of tools to be able to use in battle that a gnome wouldn't.
That will still make them feel stronger, even if their stats are the same.
I do love that this isn't like melee or martial based as well. You could do this with a wizard. You could do this with a sorcerer. Like these are just good things that you can.
Yeah, if you need to adrenaline rush to get out of danger, if you're a little bit squishy because you tanked your con and you need to get out of the melee, you can adrenaline rush to bonus action away and give yourself temporary hit points against that incoming.
And if you're an artificer who's a giant nerd, you can carry like twice as much of your alchemical gear and be like.
You're running along with a massive backpack from Sweet Tooth.
So I really like this new design. I like it a lot. So I hope I see more orcs.
I think it's a great orc.
Yeah.
Moving into Tiefling. Tieflings, they're born in the lower planes or have one or more fiendish ancestors. Again, they've gone into the 3 different types: lawful, neutral, and chaotic. If you're chaotic, you are abyssal. If you are lawful, you're infernal, as before. But now they've introduced this neutral one, the Yugoloth sort of ancestry, which is chthonic. It kind of reminds me of like Cthulhu. Chthonic. I'm not sure. CHTH. ONIC. And it tells you a little bit about maybe what you like roleplay suggestions and things, but it also says you don't have to be evil. You are humanoid. You can choose whether you're small or medium. Interestingly, unlike with humans that said you can go from 2 to 7 feet, tieflings can go from 3 to 7 feet. Their speed is 30 feet, and they live about 100 years. So slightly longer than humans and dragons and orcs.
Which I'd be happy if Dragonborn lived that long, by the way, just in general.
Just 100?
Yeah. I'd be happier if that was the case. Like
if it was just a little bit above humans.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Dark vision makes sense, and Fiendish legacy. You get spells related to your 1st level, 3rd level, and 5th level in whichever legacy you've chosen. I like.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna say. Can I say that I love the fact that they call them all legacies and they have the same format, because it's gonna make it super easy to be able.
Makes
to
it so easy. Yeah. The 1st level for Abyssal, I like. Actually, I'll go through all of them one at a time. So Abyssal has the resistance to poison damage and gives you poison spray, and then Ray of Sickness and Hold Person. I think the first 3 of those are all like thematic. The Abyssal is very like poisony realm. It's all about sickness and grossness and like chaos in the infinite abyss. Hold Person, not sure why they get Hold Person. And instead of like getting Cloud Kill or something, that's just like why do they not get something that's continuing the theme of poison?
I'd say torture. You hold someone and then you torture them. That kind of seems very chaotic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe. Although holding somebody to torture them seems more infernal than chaotic to me.
Yeah,
like chasing somebody down to torture them.
Yeah. Like how many demons have hold person? Like I don't think there's many that have hold person.
The neutral ones have resistance to necrotic and the chill touch, so they can resist and deal poison. They can resist and deal necrotic. They also have false life, which is again about necromancy, and then ray of enfeeblement, which I think is necromancy as well. So it all makes sense there. And then infernal resistance to fire and can deal fire with the firebolt. Then they've got hellish rebuke, which is fire damage, and then 5th level darkness. Again, it could be that the 5th level could have been something fire related, but I think darkness does still fit with the theme.
I like darkness for abyssal.
Darkness for abyssal.
Yeah, like switching them around, that's really great.
Yeah, a bit darkness would work for abyssal actually, because if you're thinking about the hell planes and all of this fire stuff, then it's not going to be very dark.
No.
Yeah.
Whereas in the infinite layers of the abyss with like weird grotesque monsters and chaotic demons rather than devils, there's going to be areas of darkness, and a lot of the terror from the abyss is going to come from like just the fear of the dark.
That's true.
And there's something very like controlled about whole person that fits for an infernal as well. It's just like stop, and you're like whoa.
But see, I feel like while that thematically does work, if you did switch them up, the infernal definitely gets a huge advantage, because again, like we were saying about before with the whatever they were called, the race, the
Ardlings?
Ardens, that's the one. As we were saying with them, there's like the like likely everyone is going to take the heavenly one.
If there's one like clear choice, min-maxers are going to take it.
Yeah, and I think if hold person was there, having firebolt, hellish rebuke, and hold person as your thing, I think there's just the others just don't compare. You know, like
I don't care like about it when I'm designing something, and like I don't care. I'm much more bothered about the theme. But I see what you're saying. Like as wizards, they're gonna have to like take that into account. But, like, I'm much more bothered about what the theme of the flavor is. And then on top of their legacy, they also get otherworldly presence. They all know the thaumaturgy cantrip regardless, and you can cast it with the same trait that they use for the other things.
Nice.
And that's all of the races. That's all the races that they give us in this One D&D PHB.
Yep, which is not bad. And I find it also very interesting that they didn't introduce any of the half races, like the half elves, half orcs, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah.
It means that likely there might be something big happening with that
Oh, no.
No?
No, there won't be anything happening with that, because they've put a sidebar in this that specifies that. The sidebar here that says, children of different humanoid kinds. Thanks to the magical working of the multiverse, humanoids of different kinds sometimes have children together. So folk of a human parent and orc or elf parent and whatever are particularly common, but other combinations as possible. Choose just to play a half dwarf, half gnome. You just choose one of the dwarf or gnome stat blocks, and you just play that, but you theme it as if you were one or the other. That's literally the example they've given for playing a half race, is just play one of them and then just describe yourself as having pointed ears.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Which I think is super boring and lazy.
Yeah.
I think it ignores like the more than the sum of your parts, and like there's no mix and match. If you are playing a dwarf and an elf and you choose the dwarf stat block, there is no mechanical difference to just playing a dwarf.
Yeah, so like you would like imagine if you want to play a dwarf, right? Like a dwarf orc, and you're like, can I get rid of like forge and then just like take on adrenaline rush as well? Can I do that? I guess that comes down to the GM, right? Prefacing like yes or no.
I can see that it adds a hell of a lot more work for them to do that, to have like a mix and match, because it kind of goes back to, as I mentioned a long time ago, saying like you'd have to weigh up and instead of looking at all of the dwarf traits as one block and saying, is this dwarf as powerful as this elf? Like this feature is not quite as powerful, but this feature is more so. So overall, they're just as strong. Now you'd have to balance every single individual feature with itself to be like, if you were going to mix and match, you're going to have to be like, oh, you can swap out this 2-point feature for this other 2-point feature. Yeah. But this feature you can't swap out for that because this one's weaker.
They eventually have to make a decision. They have to make a decision.
But I think
whether
they've gone
they want
with
to do
the laziest decision to just say they're essentially saying half elves don't exist, half races don't exist because they only exist in the description and roleplay rather than in the mechanical differences.
See, the way I would do it, if I was doing it, is I would have a first level feat, which is dual parentage or something like that, and then I would say that the benefit of that feat is one of the abilities.
You choose one of the abilities.
So that way you could even that way it doesn't matter which of those things you take, because the cost of that first level feat is still
that you're not getting a feat in something else.
Correct.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. And I think that
swapping out your feat in anything else for one of the for the aggressive the adrenaline rush.
Exactly. Whatever. And I think that would be absolutely perfect. I think that
or they open it up and then you just make your own out of the things that are there, and then that way you just like boom, there's no race, there's no species. You just have a list of like starter like features that you can choose for your origin.
Like taking a feat, or is just like across
just
the board?
like the other option I can see is just like turning everything into a pick your own. So like you have a dwarf.
The entire character creation becomes pick and mix.
This. If only there was a system that had race points.
We mentioned we were talking about that before, and Doug says just Pathfinder.
Look, I mean, the thing is, I mean, look, I can't really play that card because like Pathfinder stole almost all of its hat from D&D. So I mean, from like
3.5.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't really think. But no, race points as an idea is great, because then it does make it easy to chop and change and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other leg of work that needs to go into it. But you know what? Hey, if you're starting from the ground up, this is the time to do it. So. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was a lot of work. Like, I know how much work it would be to make a selection of half races, because I've done it. I have a document on my Patreon that is all about, like, if you want to play a half orc and a half dwarf, or if you want to play a half orc and a half elf, or if you want to play a half elf and a half gnome, like, they're all there. And the way that I did it was to say, you choose which of those two races is the dominant species, and which is recessive. And you take the speed and the size and everything of the dominant species that you've chosen, and then the recessive one, and then there's a list of things. If you're playing a dwarf dominant, you have this and this trait, and if you're playing a dwarf recessive, you only have this trait. And then you mix and match as you need to.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I think that's really good.
And it was a lot of work, and it's probably still not balanced because I haven't had a great deal of time to playtest it. I have had one person playing in the same campaign for 6 years as a mule, a half dwarf, half human, and that seems to be balanced fine. Yeah. But that's the only one that I've actually managed to playtest that is actually used of my rules. So.
But imagine if you had like a legion of people who could playtest it for you and give you feedback, right? So like if you had your own like,
and that's why I think it's the lazy version for them to just be like, just pick a dwarf and call yourself a half dwarf.
But can I also say that I do like the idea that some species can't crossbreed, not because I'm against the idea, but like I mean like a warforged orc. It's like let's calm down.
Yeah, in my document it says certain creatures are just too different. Like you can't have a mammal and a reptilian creator.
Stuff like that. I think I think there's a lot of thought that could go into it, and that's it. There's a lot of thought could go into it. All right.